The antiseptic smell had faded by then, but everything else still hurt. I stood at the discharge desk of St. Michael's Hospital in downtown Tontron, signing forms with my left hand because my right arm was holding my daughter against my chest, and the pen kept slipping. 7 days postpartum, 42 stitches from a C-section that had gone longer than expected, and I hadn't slept more than 2 hours in a row since the Tuesday before last. The nurse handed me my copy of the paperwork with a smile that was genuinely kind, and I remember thinking, she's the nicest person I've seen all week, and she's a stranger. My husband was waiting by the elevator. I say, waiting. He was on his phone, thumb scrolling, one shoulder leaned against the wall. He glanced up when he heard the wheels of my bag on the tile floor and gave me this look, the one I'd been seeing more of lately, that said I was slightly inconveniencing him by existing in his vicinity. Ready? He said, already turning toward the elevator button. I think so. I adjusted the baby against my chest. She was asleep, tiny and impossibly warm. Did you pull the car around? He didn't answer immediately. The elevator dinged. We stepped in. About that, he said, looking at the numbers above the door. I actually need to take the car straight to my parents' place. My dad wants me there by 2, and traffic on the 401 is going to be brutal. I waited. Surely there was a second half to that sentence. There wasn't. So, I said so. There's a TTC stop right outside. The 504 streetcar stops half a block away. It's not complicated. I stood there in that elevator with our 7-day-old daughter in my arms and 42 stitches across my abdomen, and I genuinely could not process what he was telling me. The streetcar. He wanted me to take the streetcar. She's a week old, I said. Other people take babies on transit all the time. I just had major surgery, Brendan. You're not the first woman to have a C-section. He stepped off the elevator into the lobby without looking back. I'll see you at home. I stood in the elevator until the doors started to close again. I pressed the button with my elbow to hold them open. The baby shifted, against me, made a small sound, settled. I did not get on the streetcar. I sat down on a bench in the lobby, this hard plastic bench near the information desk, and I called my father. I hadn't planned what I was going to say. I hadn't planned anything, really. I just needed to hear his voice, and then everything I'd been holding for 7 days and for the 2 years before, that just came out of me in a rush, and I was crying in the lobby of St. Michael's Hospital with my daughter asleep on my chest, and my father said, very quietly, very clearly, "Don't move. I'm coming. Let me go back, because this story doesn't start in a hospital. It starts, I think, at a dinner party in the Annex neighborhood, in the 3rd-floor apartment of a friend from grad school, in the early fall about 3 years ago. My friend was doing a PhD in urban planning at U of T, and she threw these dinners every few months. Cramped, loud, everyone sitting on mismatched chairs and passing around whatever wine was closest. And that's where I met Brendan. He was charming. I want to be honest about that because it would be easy to rewrite history and make him a villain from the first handshake, and that wouldn't be true. He was funny and quick and interested in what I said, and when I mentioned my work, he leaned forward in his chair. He asked follow-up questions. He remembered details I mentioned offhandedly and brought them back up 20 minutes later. It felt like being lit up by something. I'm a landscape architect. I run a small firm, 3 full-time people, 2 contractors, doing residential and commercial design work across southern Ontario. My father started the firm and handed it to me about 4 years ago when he retired. It's not a glamorous business. We draw site plans, choose plant species, talk clients through drainage issues, spend a lot of time in rubber boots looking at soil. But it's ours, and we're good at what we do, and I love it in the particular way you love something you grew up inside of. I didn't tell Brendan any of that at the dinner party. I just said I was in landscape architecture. When he asked who I worked for, I said it was a small firm. I wasn't being deliberately vague. It just didn't come up. What I didn't fully understand then, what I understand now with the clarity that only comes from distance, is that Brendan had a specific image of who he was going to marry. He was working in financial sales at a mid-size firm in the Bay Street corridor, earning a salary that sounded impressive until you factored in his rent and his car payments and his general approach to money, which was to spend it as fast as it arrived. He needed a wife who was presentable, reasonably professional, and, this is the part that took me the longest to see, financially unremarkable. He didn't want someone who had more than him. He wanted someone who had less. Someone who would look at his world and be grateful for it. I think he decided within the first month that I was that person. I wasn't, but I let him believe it longer than I should have. We got married 18 months after that dinner party, at a small ceremony in the Niagara region. My parents own a property out there. Farmland that my grandfather bought in the 1960s, with a house on it that my father spent years restoring. It's beautiful in the way that old Ontario farmhouses are beautiful. A little crooked, full of light, surrounded by flat fields that go gold in September. Brendan thought the property belonged to tenants. I had never corrected that impression. This is the part where people always ask, why didn't you tell him? And the honest answer is that it started as an omission and then became a test I didn't know I was giving, and by the time I realized I was testing him, I was also afraid of what he might fail. My father, when he met Brendan for the first time, shook his hand and said, "Good to meet you, son," and meant it. My father is not a complicated man. He built his firm from a single drafting table in a rented office in Etobicoke, raised 2 daughters in a 3-bedroom house in Mississauga, and his only real philosophy about money is that you don't talk about it in front of people who don't have it. He drives a 12-year-old pickup truck and keeps his nails short. He would not have announced himself as wealthy to a man he'd just met even if he'd wanted to. Brendan, for his part, looked at my father and saw a retired tradesman. He was polite enough about it. In the first year of our marriage, I saw small things. The way Brendan's eyes would go a little flat when I mentioned spending time with my family. The way he talked about making something of himself, in a tone that implied I hadn't made anything. The way he rearranged the credit card charges 1 month and then acted confused when I asked about it. Small things I put down to stress or adjustment or the ordinary friction of 2 people learning to share a life. Then I got pregnant. The pregnancy was hard in the way that some pregnancies are just hard. Not dramatic, not dangerous, just long and exhausting and full of small indignities. By the 3rd trimester, I had reduced my hours at the firm and was working mostly from home. I was slower. I was tired in a way I couldn't fully describe to someone who hadn't felt it. I needed more help than I was getting. Brendan's response to the pregnancy was to become, incrementally, less present. More work events. More dinners I wasn't invited to. More evenings where he came home after I was asleep and was gone before I woke up. When I brought it up, he would apologize in a way that was perfectly calibrated to end the conversation without resolving anything. He was good at that. My due date was in late January. My mother drove in from Mississauga every Tuesday to help me with groceries and sit with me in the afternoon. My father called every Sunday morning, same as he had my whole life. Brendan's family, his parents and his older sister, who lived out in Oakville, came over exactly once during the entire pregnancy, for a dinner that Brendan's mother spent mostly interrogating me about whether I planned to continue working, and if so, who was going to look after the baby, and whether I'd considered that daycare in Toronto was not ideal. I smiled. I refilled the wine glasses. I thought, I have been kind to these people at considerable cost to myself. My daughter was born on a Tuesday night at 11:47 p.m. Her name is Saoirse, my grandmother's name, Irish, pronounced roughly like Saoirse, which I knew would cause difficulties but had decided I didn't care about. She weighed 6 pounds, 9 ounces. She had my father's hands, which sounds strange to say about a newborn. But it's true, these long, careful fingers that gripped my thumb and didn't let go. Brendan was in the delivery room. He held her for about 4 minutes before he said he was going to get coffee and would be right back. He was back 2 hours later. I don't know where he went. I didn't ask. By the time I was discharged, I had been in the hospital 7 days. 7 days of fluorescent lights and 3-hour sleep cycles, and learning to nurse with cracked skin, and figuring out how to move from bed to chair without pulling my incision. 7 days of Brendan visiting in the afternoons, staying an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and then having somewhere to be. My mother wanted to come stay with us for the first week at home. Brendan had said, a few weeks before the birth, that he thought it would be better to figure things out as a family unit first. He'd said it in the tone of someone making a reasonable, considered parenting decision, and I'd deferred to him, and now I was standing in the lobby of St. Michael's Hospital, holding my daughter and calling my father from a plastic bench, because my husband had just told me to take the streetcar home. My father picked up on the second ring. I couldn't explain it in any organized way. It came out in pieces, the streetcar, the car, the whole 7 days of him coming and going. The months before that, the dinner with his mother. The Tuesday nights he didn't come home until after midnight, all of it compressed into about 3 minutes of me talking too fast in a hospital lobby while Saoirse slept against my chest. My father let me finish. Then he said, "Don't move. I'm coming, Dad, you're in Mississauga. 45 minutes. Stay where you are." He made it in 38. He pulled up in his pickup truck, and I almost laughed. This enormous pickup truck with the company logo on the door. The stylized oak leaf that had been our firm's logo since before I was born, which I had never connected in Brendan's presence to the firm that Brendan's firm had been courting for a commercial contract for the past 18 months. He got out and hugged me with one arm, very carefully, and looked at Saoirse for a long moment without saying anything, and then he put my bag in the bed of the truck and helped me into the passenger seat. On the way to Mississauga, he didn't interrogate me. He asked if I'd eaten. I said no. He stopped at a Tim Hortons on Lake Shore and got me a soup and a tea. He didn't ask me what I wanted to do. He understood, in the way that my father has always understood the things I haven't said yet, that I didn't know what I wanted to do. He just drove. I stayed at my parents' house for 2 weeks. My mother took the 3 a.m. feed so I could sleep. She made soups and stews and left them in labeled containers in the fridge. She sat with me while I nursed and didn't make conversation I had to respond to. My father built a small changing station in the guest room from leftover materials in his workshop, sanded smooth and painted white. Soorse slept in a bassinet beside my bed and woke up every few hours, and I fed her in the dark and looked out the window at the streetlights in my parents' driveway and tried to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. Brendan texted on the first day. He said he'd come home and I wasn't there. He said that was a lot. He said we needed to talk. I didn't respond for 24 hours. Then I sent him my parents' address and told him I needed space to recover. He replied that he was worried about me making decisions while emotional. I put my phone face down on the nightstand and didn't pick it up again until morning. On the 4th day, my father came into the guest room in the evening and sat in the armchair in the corner and said, "Do you want me to tell you what I know about your husband's firm?" I looked at him. "I've been doing some due diligence," he said, in the understated tone he uses for everything. For the contract, my lawyer had them looked at. He handed me a printed summary. Not much, a few pages, but enough. Brendan's firm had been reorganized 18 months ago after a compliance issue. 3 of the senior brokers had left. The firm's assets under management had dropped significantly. Brendan's own book of business, according to public filings and what my father's people had found, was thin in a way that his lifestyle did not reflect. "He's been servicing debt," my father said. "I don't think he's been managing it well." I sat with that for a moment. "Did you know before?" I asked. My father looked at the window. I had questions. I should have asked them out loud. He paused. "That's on me." It wasn't on him, but I understood why he said it. The following week, my husband came to my parents' house. He came on a Sunday afternoon unannounced, which was already the wrong choice. My mother opened the door and brought him into the living room with a politeness that, if you knew, my mother, was its own kind of statement. Brendan sat on the edge of the couch and looked around the house. Really looked, probably for the first time, at the bookshelves, the framed photographs, the architectural drawings my father had hung in the hallway, the view of the back garden through the large windows that my father had designed himself. I came downstairs with Soorse. I sat across from him. He started with the version of the conversation where everything was a misunderstanding. The streetcar thing was poor judgment under stress. He knew that. He owned it. He was sorry. The distance during the pregnancy was work pressure, which had been significant, which I maybe hadn't fully appreciated. He wanted us to go home and start over and be the family we were supposed to be. I listened. I had Soorse in the crook of my arm. She was awake, looking up at the ceiling with the particular unfocused attention of a 2-week-old, completely unconcerned. "Brendan," I said, when he finished, "who do you think owns this house?" He blinked. "Your parents, I assume. Your dad's retired, so—" "And the property in Niagara? Where we got married. I thought that was a rental. Or a family friend's." It's been a family for 60 years, I said. "My grandfather bought it." A pause. "And the firm," I said. "Halloran Landscape Design. You know the name." I watched him remember. Watched the recognition move across his face. Halloran, the firm his company had been trying to sign as an institutional client. The firm with commercial contracts across the GTA. The one that had done the green space work on 2 of the new condo developments downtown he'd walked past 100 times. He started. "That's my firm," I said. "My father started it. He gave it to me." The silence in that living room was very complete. I wasn't angry when I said it. That's the part that surprised me most. Later, I had expected to feel triumphant, or at least sharp, and instead I just felt tired. Very tired and very clear. "I'm not telling you this to embarrass you," I said. "I'm telling you because you've spent 2 years making decisions about me based on a version of me that you invented. And I let you, which is also something I have to account for." He tried several more approaches over the next half hour. He was sorry. He hadn't meant it to look like it looked. He loved me. He loved Soorse. He wanted to fix it. I said, "I know you think you mean all of that." My father appeared in the doorway of the living room at some point and asked Brendan if he could offer him anything. Tea, water, in the tone that is not actually an offer of hospitality but a signal that the visit is concluding. Brendan stood up. He looked at Soorse one more time. And whatever he was thinking, he kept it to himself. He left. My mother closed the front door and came back to the living room and sat beside me and didn't say a single word, and that was exactly the right thing. What followed was not clean or simple. Separations rarely are. And I'm not going to pretend ours was some elegant dissolution. There were lawyers, and there were difficult conversations, and there were nights when Circe was screaming at 2 in the morning, and I was sitting on the floor of the guest room with my back against the bed thinking, I have absolutely no idea how to do this. But I had my firm, which had kept running in my absence because my team is genuinely excellent. And my father had stepped in 2 days a week to keep things moving. I had my parents, who had converted their basement into a proper apartment by the time Circe was 6 weeks old. Insulation, a separate entrance, a small kitchen. The whole thing, my father refusing to hear any objection about it. I had a daughter who at 6 weeks old, had started doing this thing where she looked at your face like she was memorizing it, feature by feature, as if you were a landscape she needed to understand. The financial piece was what Brendan had been worried about, it turned out. His debt situation was considerably worse than the summary my father had shown me. And his lawyer, once ours was done being thorough, would do much about it. Brendan moved back into the apartment we'd shared. His name was on the lease. Not mine. And I later heard from a mutual friend that he'd had to sell the car. His car. He'd been leasing it anyway. I didn't feel satisfied when I heard that. I want to be honest about that too. Because the story you tell yourself about these things matters. I felt sad, and then I felt tired of feeling sad about someone who had chosen, at every available turn, to see me as a category rather than a person. Circe is 5 months old now. She has discovered that her hands belong to her, and she is delighted by this information. She grabs things, my hair, my father's collar, the drawstrings on hoodies, with a grip that is completely out of proportion to her size. She laughs when my mother makes a specific sound, a low buzzing nonsense syllable that my mother apparently also used on me, and it gets her every time. This full-body laugh that seems to surprise her as much as it surprises us. My firm this past quarter landed the largest single contract we have ever had. A park redesign for a mid-sized city north of Toronto, a project my team has wanted for 2 years. I was in a meeting in a boardroom, Source in a carrier strapped to my chest, sleeping through the whole thing when we shook hands. My father called that evening and I could hear him smiling through the phone. My mother asks, sometimes, with her particular brand of not quite asking, whether I think about what might have happened if I'd handled things differently. Told Brendan who I was from the beginning. Given him the chance to choose differently with full information. And I think about it. Of course I think about it. But I also think about standing in that hospital lobby with my daughter, 7 days old, 42 stitches, holding a phone in a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. And I think about my father's voice, don't move, I'm coming. And I think that some things reveal themselves on their own schedule, whether you're ready to see them or not. Brendan didn't fall in love with me. He fell in love with the version of me that fit the story he was already telling himself about his life. And when the real version appeared, not on a streetcar, not quietly, but in a boardroom and a farmhouse in Niagara and a pickup truck with my family's name on the door, there was nothing for that story to stand on. Circe reaches up and grabs my finger in the dark. I let her hold it for as long as she wants. I've got nowhere else to be.